I'd like to call the March 4th meeting of Gloucester County Board of Supervisors to order. Ms. Steele, will you call the roll?
Mr. Gibson?
Here.
Dr. Orth? Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Hutson?
Here.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Here.
Mr. Bazzani?
Here.
Mr. Nicosia?
Here.
All
Will
present.
you all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation by Mr. Tony Nicosia?
Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
For which it stands,
one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You bow your head with me. Heavenly Father, we thank you for an opportunity to come together and to discuss county business. God, give us the wisdom that we need to make good decisions on behalf of Gloucester County. Be with us tonight, go with us tomorrow, and go with us into the budget season as we navigate through what is best for Gloucester County. We thank you for who you are, we thank you for who you've been, and we thank you for who you're going to be. In your name, amen.
Amen. All right, now I'd like to open up the citizen comment period. If anyone in the audience would like to come up and speak. Ms. Cronin, do we have any? Mr. Brown, last call? Okay. We'll close the citizen comment period. We'll move to the regular agenda. As I said earlier, I'd like for us all to write down, if we have a question on something at Ms. Steele's presentation, if we'd write the page number down and just maybe highlight the line and then ask questions at the end, I'd appreciate it. Ms. Steele.
Good evening. Be here, and it's a remarkable time of year. It's like, how could it be here again already? But it's budget time. I said I've defined a new type of March Madness is the budget and all of our meetings that we have coming up. So as the computer's warming up, we're going to go through the budget presentation, and after we get to the calendar part where we talk about the schedule, after that there is a section on fees. So I just want to remind you that there's a little carryover that we're not, don't think we're done when we're not done, I guess is the point. So the 25 budget highlights. This budget includes a 3.2% COLA, which is in line with not only the social security apportion for 2025, but also is in line with the region and somewhat lower than some, but mostly average with about what everybody else is doing for COLAs. It includes some select staff positions that would be promotions or administrative increases, and a few additions in staff, which we'll go through. And it includes our support, as usual, of our external agencies and partners who help the county government do so many things for the citizens of the county. The 25 budget incorporates no tax increase as requested by the board. It has level funding for Gloucester schools, things like the 12% increase in health insurance cost, and when we meet with the school board, you'll hear about their 21% proposed or anticipated health increase. As we've discussed before, this proposed budget includes an addition to the county administrator's contingency, taking it up to $500,000. And it has nearly $1 million in tax relief, which again we'll discuss in a few minutes. And in order to, unlike previous budgets, in order to balance the operating budget, we are having to use one-time funds because of not having enough revenue available to us. And then again, I've got some potential small fees to discuss with the board. So we're going to start with the real estate assessment and personal property, and it should say real estate tax. I think that was a carryover from last year. My apologies. But this does show the record, and just kind of as a reminder of what the tax rate is now, which is 0.583. And that's what the proposed budget is balanced on. And you can see the different years that there have been tax increases, the last one being in 2022, and the years that there was an assessment when we equalized or didn't. What is a penny worth? One thing when I met with the board members, I said it was very close to this year's, and I was thinking it was a little bit higher. It's just a little bit lower, but it is right in line, very similar to what a penny was or is under the current year. And we talk about this frequently that when comparing to other localities, you have to look and see how many other services are provided. And so even though we're comparing the average home value against the tax rate to get a comparable amount, there are other things that these localities that pay more get, such as trash service, or maybe they have community centers for the public. They may have paid fire and rescue departments, things like that. I also would like to note, though, that we don't have to pay for solid waste, and if we did, that would be a considerable amount, but because of our deal with waste management, that is not a cost to the county. I also would like to note that we frequently compare ourselves to other localities saying, well, they have businesses and things to help them, and that's how they're able to do more of the types of community services. Well, if you look at the list, there are some like Nicosia that have limited areas for business, and they pay a higher rate because they're more of a bedroom community. But all of the others are all paying more than Gloucester County is paying, even though they have industries that we don't have. So I really hope that the public will understand how low our tax rate is in comparison to others around the region. And again, that's why I think we're in the position that we're in when you see the budget through tonight. What really has come, county administrators and city managers have become more concerned about in the last few years in our area of the state is the growing amount of tax relief that is provided. And it's a great thing that we offer, that the state law, that we offer 100% disabled veterans tax relief, and that the board has been proactive in raising the amount of revenue that are allowable income that elderly people can have and still qualify for discounts, and also for it's elderly and disabled. And then this is the first year that we're very appreciative that our fire and rescue have a personal property tax discount, and the vehicle that they use as volunteers, they're not paying taxes on that. But if you look at the pattern of how things have grown, our total growth since 2016 is 90% in how much that the tax relief total is. So it's going to be $965, almost $1 million this year. So almost 2 cents on our tax rate is not collected, and I would propose that all of us need to pay more taxes for the fact that we are no longer collecting these taxes because of the additional relief. It's very much changed our budget. The personal property tax rates, only one changed in our area, and we are still, as we were last year, the second lowest. Now, some of these have prorated systems, and we do not. And also adding in this year a very helpful figure is what a penny would do, so that if anybody was curious about what raising personal property would do, it would generate $45,720. I'd like to move from our revenues to talk about compensation, because that is the largest part of our budget. And I want to highlight sort of a risk review. A couple years ago, we had a very terrible turnover rate, and we could be back there at any moment. 11% of our current staff, so more than 1 out of 10, is currently eligible in FY24 to retire. That if they were not being compensated fairly, if they didn't feel appreciated, if they didn't have good working conditions and things, they could leave. By 2029, we're looking at 24% of our staff, 1 in 4, being able to retire. When we lose seasoned employees, whether it's for leaving for retirement or for other reasons, we lose institutional knowledge. Those of us who deal with state and federal government have seen this happen a lot. There's complete turnovers in some of the state offices, and things are not running as smoothly for us that we see as they used to, because we're missing those former employees. With the changes, we also have some more youthfulness, that we have 47% of our current workforce, so almost 1 in 2, has only been with the county for less than 5 years. And this is most notable in the places you would expect. The Sheriff's Department, so 26% of his employees are in that limited experience category of 5 or less years, and 18% in social services. So our retention and succession planning based on these statistics is very important. The proposed personnel changes, I've already mentioned, the 3.2% COLA, and that is at a cost of $880,161, and that includes the sheriff and social services employees. I have 3.5 new positions that I've proposed, and we'll talk about them in a moment. And then there are a certain select number of promotions and administrative increases that have been included, and some that were not included in the budget. And I'm afraid somebody's going to ask, so I'm going to go ahead and say, why is there a difference? And there was a number of positions in the voter registrar's office, and unfortunately I haven't had a chance to speak with her yet, but those promotions are not included in the budget at this point. So she may be contacting you all and asking for that kind of support. On this chart, there are 4 positions that are in green, and those are the ones that are recommended for funding. 3 of them full-time and 1 of them part-time. And 1 of them is a shared position where 50% of the cost, and this is for the fraud investigator, 50% of the cost will be paid by Gloucester County, and 25% by Matthews, and 25% by Middlesex. So the total cost for the 3 positions is $229,485. We have a new uniform patrol deputy who would be an additional position because we have added a position that will have another service dog to be able to do special assignments, and we need to keep a road deputy out to take that person's place. The revenue specialist, the workload on the Commissioner of Revenue's office just continues to grow in the things that they are asked to do, and having as many as 2 or 3 people coming in and asking for relief each week, and constantly having to go through those forms and things, and they can get behind on some of their other work, and they need another person in their office to help out. The HR assistant is a part-time position, and this would allow them to have someone to answer the phone and greet people, especially on the days when they are all doing their routine assignments, like as we close out the books and process things for the month. Utilities only has 1 position requested, and if you might recall in our 10-year plan, we built in for 2 additional positions within the 10 years, and the first one was going to happen in a couple years. When we looked at how much overtime was being paid and the pressure that was being put on keeping the water treatment plant open for so many hours, it was obvious that we needed to add that position now and not wait. And we have talked to the staff down there, and they are supportive of losing their overtime because it's just too much, and they would like to have another person to help them out. This one might be a little bit of a surprise to you, but as you may recall, we have gone through and done evaluations on our different volunteer boards that do have compensations, and made sure they were equitable. Well, we wanted to do the same thing with the Board of Supervisors because we hadn't done that in some time. So you can see, looking at our region, y'all are in the green. So sort of, towards the lower end of localities. And then when you compare to other localities that have the same size population that we have, our board is the lowest. So the budget includes, effective January 1, so it would be a half year for FY25, a $600 increase for each of the board members. I think that's a drop in the bucket for some of the things that you all have to put up with, and I have a feeling y'all will probably be wanting to be modest about it or whatever, but it's not much money out of the budget, and I think it's time and it's due. So in a full year, it would only be another $4,500. And with the change, I'll mention, with the change in the General Assembly, that's why that's also allowed. They have like 2 different ways that the raises can be done. Okay, looking at the general fund, and this includes all of our transfers, the largest one being to the school system and then to social services and the Children's Services Act and our capital improvements and our debt service. And you'll see that overall at the very top, when you include all those, our budget is about $1.1 million less in general fund than it is in the current year. And the reason for that is because the lower transfers going out. We had some debt retirement, we have less capital spending, and we have an increase in state funding coming in for the CSA, which reduces our required contribution. FMRR, the Facilities Maintenance, Repair, and Replacement Program, is one that we rely on to try and keep a lot of different equipment up and running. And this year, the total is $1.1 million in request. If you look, it's like the 4th line down, the sheriff's vehicles are in there at $362,000. Last year was the last year that we had some bit of a special pot that went to that. So no longer do we have that. So this comes just straight out of general fund. And then there are 2, though, that have their own special funds. Tourism has $15,000 and the cable fund. So that's $45,000 that doesn't come from general fund, but instead from the restricted accounts. And with what we've proposed, there are 3, for the first time, I think since we started the FMRR program, we would not be funding $363,136. So this is a cut that had to be made to balance the budget. On the outlook for our revenue, again, if you look at the top, you'll see that we have a decrease in revenue, and we have just a small increase in tax revenue. Remember that at the mid-year report, the finance director explained and reminded you all that we did not make real estate tax budget last year. We will not be making it this year, and therefore, in adjusting that to make it whole and not having make it correct, there's a decrease, but then there's a little bit of growth thrown on it, so you've got a $12,000 increase there. We also have, again, a reduction in fund balance that's been used and what carryover will be for 24 to 25. We have a number of other fund accounts, as mentioned, education being the biggest one, and the circle part shows that I have proposed level funding. That I had originally included $500,000 to go to the school board, to the school system, to help them with their raises, their COLAs, and things that they've got additional expenses. And because of having to balance the budget and come up with money, that was one of the first things that we took out. And let me go, just pointing out really quick on this other slide, you've got the cafeteria fund, special education fund. So this is like the total budget for the schools. And then on this one, it's looking at, doesn't have those other cafeteria and special ed funds. And it has the county's general fund part of the $30 million again in the local transfer, and also the 3.2 for debt service. This was one of the things that I think that the board has been looking at in the past is the number of students and the enrollment versus the county portion of contribution. There's always to include inflation, that things cost more than they did before, and they also don't ever have the wonderful ability to just divide things up. It's like if you lose a student here, another student there, and you know, different grades, different programs. But all right, I thought I had another slide and I forgot that I removed it, but I look forward to you all, if you haven't seen the superintendent's program that he presented his budget to the school board, we'll have, of course, a review of that at the joint meeting, and you'll see some additional statistics that show that Gloucester, with our size of the number of students that we have, are not, Gloucester County itself is not paying as much as other localities are for their local portion. Social services, another one of our funds, it's a slight increase mainly because of the full-time staff, of the recommended full-time staff. Children's Service Act, already mentioned, it's going down. Capital Fund, we'll go through the capital projects later, but again, a decrease. And then the opioid abatement program, this is looking into what will be happening next year, and of course this is self-funded. And then the debt service fund, which is also has changes, and I'm gonna pass over that one and come back and study it, and if there's any questions, and I may have to get Maria to help me remember some of the things that we've talked about there. The school sales tax fund, we are now making payments, so we'll see more of the funds going out. That is the wrong title on the slide. I don't know how that happened. I apologize. Yeah. That is Sanitary District 1. And we're expecting a 732 contribution to go to fund balance. We're looking good in both of them. And so I think what happened is somehow we missed that slide on the sales tax. I think but right, and the main thing is to know that we're paying out as well as collecting, and then we keep the money in the reserve account. Mosquito control, no use of fund balance and adding to it, so in good shape there as well. And then the utilities fund, I think we've talked a lot about the utilities budget recently, but this includes what is going to be discussed at the with the equipment fee being charged and a change to the structure of the sewer fees, and that'll be discussed tomorrow night at the public hearing. Okay, capital improvements. This is the same exact document that you had in the capital improvement plan, so that's the list of everything for the 5 years. Then we had the list of everything for FY25. Since that time, 2 different things have happened. The schools, with the state money that they have, are looking at doing the lock set replacement and the sidewalk project that were both listed originally. And then because of budget cuts, I'm taking a chance, and I removed the $160,000 for the grant match. I think the board recalls that there's 3 different grants that are possible for funding Gloucester Point Beach projects, and only one of them requires a match, so we're hoping we get the other. But if we just get this one, and I would take it out of county administrator's contingency if the board approved. And that way we weren't holding money that would cut another project. What is included is, I had proposed $2 million before when I spoke, so we're right at it. Closest I could get was $2.4 million, with a little bit of wiggling things around, taking that 160 out, taking out the additional projects that the schools are going to be able to fund. And this year, we were able to increase the school bus replacement cycle up $95,750 more. And the fund balances also show a $41,000 allotment that would be leftover funds from this year that would go with that 595 because they've already done the project, so that would give them about $640,000 to spend on buses next year. Here are the projects that are pushed back. So we would not be funding the Hutson House. We are only partially funding the paving, not funding Brown Park, not funding the playground equipment, not funding the HVAC at Body Tot, not funding all of the schools, and not funding the marquee signs that the schools would like. So that's $3.3 million of FY25 projects that would be pushed back. And we already have 5.1 on the list for next year, which is not doable as it is. And then we're going to add another 3.3, and when you add in the inflation rate, that puts us at 8.6 million. And let me remind you, and it sounds a little bit depressing, but I think it is, this is just PAYGO. This is not debt borrowing. The debt borrowing that was requested is here, and nothing is recommended for funding. So we would only be doing the $2 million in PAYGO. The utilities capital budget, one small change that I believe we kind of covered with you all at the retreat, and that is not doing the RO well project and instead working on our compliance projects. So that's the number one, and that's the one line, and that's the only change. And I can see, Maria, we need to change total cost to include that 561. And that will hopefully help us with some of the issues that we're facing over the next 2 years. So that's just continuation. And then there's the bottom line. So 1.8 million in capital projects, all PAYGO. 560,000, if you agree to this, would be from the development fund, and then 1.3 out of the either operating money that they bring in and or the unassigned fund balance as an enterprise account. We, as I mentioned, have a number of external requests of our partners that we work with. This is a small print because it's a long list, and it includes civic groups, it includes Bay Aging and Rappahannock Community College and our planning district commissions, et cetera. The ones that are in gray, we do not have those figures yet. I anticipate it's going to be around 50,000 again for the grant writer and the 42,350. So those are just placeholders because we don't have the exact amount. If it's more, we'll be short. If it's not, we'll have a little bit over. And you can see the projects that, the difference in what they asked for and what is funded. Fire and rescue, in addition to the fact that the volunteers now have the ability to get a vehicle taken off of their personal property tax billing, we also, from the departments themselves, we corrected one thing that we were made aware of this year, and that's what we've been charging a water bill to the Abingdon Volunteer Fire and Rescue. And it's kind of like if we charge them, then they can turn around and ask us for more money, and Gloucester has theirs paid. So we're correcting that, and they know that going forward. So we cover the water and the electricity for all of the stations. Abingdon requested less than last year, so there was a savings of $536,286. Gloucester is wanting to do a couple of different projects. One of them is to put up a metal building like they have at the Harcum station and at Sassafras for storing their equipment. And then they also had some inflationary expenses, and then they asked for funding for additional salaries to pay for their part-time workers who run rescue. After had a couple of different meetings with them, met with each of the volunteer fire and rescues, and after meeting with them and talking to them about the funds that they currently have and what their plans are, they graciously agreed that they could reduce their original request. So from the times that I met with you all, it's that personnel portion was cut in half. And so when you look at what Abington asked for in less and what Gloucester asked for in additional, we still end up with a net reduction, which is one of the few times that this happens in this budget, so it's very helpful with some of the other things that we're dealing with. Wanted to point out some of the inflation issues, and you can just see the charts. This is looking at fuel and electric, and you can see that the costs have increased 64% and 18% respectively, and things have slowed down, but we need for not only the board but the citizens to understand that when they are facing inflation at the stores, when they need to buy things and when they go fill up, we are too. And we do these things in bulk. So inflation has really hurt a lot. We also are paying much higher bills. I think people know that whether it's the minimum salaries to the inability to hire people and having to pay greater salaries for computer software companies and things like that, our maintenance service contracts are all going up. And we try to have built-in plans, and as an example, one of them said, well, we just can't do it, and we had to, we switched companies because we were not going to pay what they were asking for. We are also seeing our health insurance go up, and I think the board remembers that we do a split, so if we're looking at a 12%, it means for both the employer and the employees. So how to balance the budget with the different needs and with the revenue that's projected. We have use of one-time funds and fund balance. We profited $275,000 from the sale of the county garage, and that is sitting in this year's budget and would be July 1 rolling over to fund balance. We also have $500,000 currently in the budget that we expected to spend, and our first bill for the radio project will not be happening until, that should say, FY26. And with that, we have, no, it is 25. Sorry, we already have the money in 25 budget. This is additional, this is 24 money. And using a portion of that, 246, so a little bit less than half is needed. And then I've mentioned about the fund balance for the county administrator's contingency. And to make sure everybody understands how this works, it's sort of like fake money out there that is, it's got a title on it, and people ask for permission, and when it's necessary, I come to you all and ask for permission for using it. But the hope is that somebody who has an overrun through their payroll, through their benefits, through some other line item at the end of the year, they'll actually be able to cover that. Sometimes that's not possible. So, and a lot of people don't, a lot of departments never need county administrator contingency. So at the end of the year, we're taking all the funds that are left over before going back as carryover and covering that county administrator contingency. In the past, we've been able to do very well with that, but it's been kind of creeping a little bit, and with having a closer budget, it's more chances than not that we would be borrowing from other departments to balance. In the absolute worst case scenario that we don't have enough carryover money, like we just totally spend out, and there's nothing, there's no carryover to the next year, then that 500,000 or any portion of it sitting there, that would have to come out of the fund reserve. But that would be like almost impossible to have happen. It would have to be the worst case scenario. But I wanted to reiterate that even though this is there and we have to have it there, it's our intent to not spend it because we will somewhere have savings within the budget. And then it's not only where do we get the revenue from, but how can we reduce our expenses? As I've mentioned, we reduced FMRR by $363,000, and then we've level funded Gloucester schools and the civic groups. If the board was to consider either moving things around or having additional revenue in some manner, what are the things that aren't being funded that the board might want to consider? First of all is reestablishing the FMRR. The next would be, these are not in order, I'm sorry, but just possibilities. Another would be funding the nonprofits request. Another one is the capital, that we are going to just keep growing further behind there. School funding as well, and I'm sure you'll hear more about that at the joint meeting. And we've had in the past listed economic incentives for business development to try to help with generating revenue. And one that I forgot to list on there is additional staff positions. We have other departments that would very much like to have and be better at their service. They'd like to have additional help, and they would be better and faster with service if they had more people. And then the reminder of what the penny is for each of those. The next is our typical tax rate advertising form, and my suggestion is that the board advertise at 0.603 or a 2-cent tax increase, and also looking at a potential 10 cents, or it could be other way around, one or the other. It depends upon what the board might want to do, but to advertise the 10% on the personal property. And when we get through, obviously y'all will be adopting that of what to put in. I think anybody listening to public should understand that many times these rates are advertised and they are a safety net, but they don't necessarily mean anything about what the actual rate will be. But it allows the board to consider if there are other things that you'd like to see funded and the money is not there. The budget calendar is here for you, and my suggestion is, and this is at least 3 of the 4 can come on March 13th, is to have at that budget work session, we ask each of the department heads, the sheriff and the department heads, and the Commissioner of Revenue may or may not be able to make it that night, to come and talk about their personnel request. And because if, for example, that's $229,000 net, and if the board was not inclined to fund those, it would be better to know that early in the cycle of making budget adjustments. I hope that you will fund them. We have then the joint meeting at T.C. Walker on the 19th. Then we have our town hall also at T.C. Walker, and then the public hearing, and then we have 2 other budget work sessions, and our budget adoption is scheduled for April 15th. It was mentioned at the last meeting about possibly having one of the sessions dedicated to talking about the boat tax, pros, cons, et cetera. Ms. Cronin was able to contact York River Marina, and the representative is more than happy to come, but she also was very honest about not having statistical kind of data. They have instinct and kind of observance, but there is not any particular kind of data that's studied about that said that they've been able to generate more or do things differently since the boat tax was eliminated. I'm looking for guidance on that tonight. And then if you would like to have a session that's dedicated towards the people who are the external requests, whether that's fire and rescue, whether that's the community college, any of those, a lot of them come the night of the public hearing. But if you would like to have that, or other selected departments that as you go through not only the packet but the one sheet, the Ms. Calloway included, if there's some particular departments that based on that you'd like to know more about, then you can tell us and we'll set up those meetings. I'm going to just a couple quick slides to follow up on the conversation from the last meeting. So we have a potential revenue increase, mentioned 5 different fee increases, environmental and planning, and that total estimated on our numbers would bring in another $14,750. And then on the building inspections, we would anticipate $17,200, as well as the fact that the 2% levy would be paid by the customer to the state, just like what you do with sales tax. And as an example, the building official provided this information on some residential and commercial case examples of what would it actually mean. So the top is what would be normally on a 2,400 square foot home, kind of a typical circumstances, and the current fee would be $553. With the proposed fee, it would be $635. And for a commercial building of 5,000 square feet, it's going from $1,250 to $1,340. And again, mentioning that the tax levy, so in addition to the $82 more for the homeowner, it would be another $1,270 in the state levy and $90 more for the commercial building with $2,880. And that is the end. And I don't, how much? 22? 42. All right, I ran 2 minutes over. That's not too bad. Okay. So I want to thank Maria and the budget team. This is a group effort, and it's been going on for a long time, and there's no way we could do it. I could do it without them. And Maria and I have been like nights and weekends, and I was so happy to have the admin staff today with the DCAs there to help go over things, and just appreciate everybody's help, as well as the superintendent. I appreciate his support here tonight, and again, look forward to the joint meeting. We've been meeting monthly and have a great rapport, and just a lot of people go into putting this together, so thank you, and I'm going to sit down and be glad to answer questions.
All right. Who has any questions for Ms. Steele?
You want to start?
Go ahead. And if Phil or Mr. Bazzani has a question on a page that you're on, let's ask that question while we're on that area.
I'm just going to go quickly through my questions, and they're not concerns. They're just really questions. Slide 5 showing the tax rates for the different localities. We all have to realize that we're actually comparing apples and oranges here, because most of these other larger localities have 3 times the population that we have. They have a paid fire and rescue. They have paid trash pickup. They have paid community centers. They have leaf local pickup, things like that we don't have in Gloucester County. So even though we have equalized our rate and it shows it's a low rate, these other cities and counties have also equalized their rate. So they have a larger population. So it's commensurate, their tax rates are commensurate with the population size. That's the only comment I have there. On page 6, go ahead.
For that, with the paid fire and police, I think it would look good when we use this if we could do a rough estimate as to what it would take for us to have a paid fire department. 3 of these localities listed also have to, with their tax revenue, maintain their roads, because Newport News and Hampton and Williamsburg are all cities. So part of that actually goes to their road maintenance fund as well. So it'd be nice if we're going to use something like this, if we could see what an expected cost of any of those services would be, so we would see where we would be if we offered some of the same, not everything the same, because not everybody has everything that we're looking at, but I believe most of these have a paid fire, or at least a portion of their fire department is paid, which I think would probably get us, if we had to do that, would get us very close, if not exceeding some of these numbers. I would like to see that if we're going to use a chart like that.
Very good. That's a good point. On page 6, you look at the 2023 impact of elderly and veterans. That was $889,000, and now we have $965,000, which is about an $80,000 increase in that amount. That's, to me, the way you presented that, it was like this is the single most impactful revenue impact that we have in the county. I don't believe that's necessarily true for this budget. It's just a $65,000 increase, and I don't see that as being so impactful to our budget. On page 11, go ahead.
Page 6. I was interested in the fact that the support for the elderly has actually gone down quite a bit in terms of from 291 2016 to 189. Any idea why, when we have a policy that provides support for people of minimal income at a pro rate, Do we know?
So, the commissioner provided some information a while back that noted, I believe, there were either 11 or 14 deaths. So people who had been on the program passed away. Some sold their property, and others became financially not qualified anymore. So there's a little bit of decline for that reason, I think.
Okay.
Well, while we're on that page.
Go ahead.
I thought that the veterans level, we don't know what it is for 24, correct? So we're still using 23 numbers, even though we thought 24 increased. So, and I think where Ms. Steele was going on this is where it's because of the elderly and veterans.
And thank you for your presentation. I know a lot of work went into this on your behalf and staff's behalf. Question on page 11, the fraud investigator, as you described it, we're paying 50% of the costs, and then 2 other counties 25%. So the total position is 160,000, or is the total position 80,000? Because it seems 160 for a fraud investigator seems pretty high.
It's the 80.
Okay, 80 is the total.
Total.
So our portion would be 40, roughly?
Right, and that 229, so the total cost for all those positions would be 263, but because of the reduction, our part would be 229.
Okay. Okay, so it's reduced by that 40 to get to the 229. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, can I go back to page 9?
Sure. No.
Yeah.
Oh.
Hey, I'm sorry, I'm not directing, Mr. Chair is, I'm gonna,
Just a quick question on, so with regard to recruiting people, I know that the governor had strong recommendations that they change what people can do in terms of positions. They said that some positions didn't need a college education. They changed that for experience. Do you think that may have a possible impact on our ability to recruit people who may not have a college education but have many years of experience that replace that?
Our policy is that it has to be for almost everything, it is the college degree, if it's required for that job, or the equivalent. So that's in there already in our part. So if somebody has 30 years experience or something like that in that field, they would still qualify.
Okay, and then page 11 on that, the revenue specialist, how much support comes from the state? Because they do get money.
This position would not, there would not be any state support for it. However, the Commissioner of Revenue is very convincing that she will be generating additional revenue because of what it will allow her to do, and she can explain that. So it's not where we feel 100% like we can just build it in, but I think it will have a great impact not only on the service and the timing, but also on the ability to capture more funds that people are not submitting.
Yeah, I think, as Mr. Bazzani said, having her come and
Yes.
talk to us about that would be very valuable.
Yes.
13? Okay.
Well, the utilities, I know in the previous page, positions that you wanted to fund were in green. Are you saying that the utilities fund is going to get funded or not?
It is included in the budget.
Okay, so it should be
I should have put it in green.
green. Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may just address one more thing on page 11. I know that we've all discussed this before with building inspection and some backlog there, and I know I've gotten some feedback from folks in my district of some frustration, and I know they're doing the best they can, but I just would like to put a place mark there. It's a solid salary, but well deserved. But if there is a way we could address that in this budget, I think that would be very helpful. I know we've got so many needs, but I just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Just a question on that. Great point, Mr. Gibson. But also, we haven't had our building inspection office at full capacity in quite some time either. So I think, it might be helpful, but for me, the bigger issue would be, can we get the office fully staffed and then really have the opportunity to see. I think it's a great point, but I think if we can make sure we get people in here to do these jobs, maybe we won't have the issue before we
So
add
we have
another
open
position.
positions that we can't fill.
Yes.
And keep them.
Keep, them.
So just lost
we
one.
just had another resignation. So
Okay.
we only have 4 inspectors, and when we lose one, then we're down to 3, and it does take more time.
So when you prepare the budget for the department, and these positions that you haven't filled, is that position salary included in the request, or have we backdropped?
It's in there as if it would be there July 1, as everybody else. We do have vacancy savings where we plan on not every position being full. That's another way we balance the budget.
Right. So the
That might
vacancy,
be another good thing to point out is the amount of vacancy savings that's and transfer savings that's
that
listed.
you included in the budget, because I think that's something that we've, talked about in the past, but, as Mr. Chriscoe said, trying to fill those positions is necessary, but I know it's tough trying to find people
It's very
for the salaries that we
competitive.
offered.
Middlesex, at many of the meetings I've been to, they've been begging for people. We use work as required, so we try to hire people who are retired to try to help fill in the gaps.
Okay.
Next question, next page.
What page are we on?
We're on 13,
And 14.
14.
I have a question on 14.
Go ahead.
I can't pull up the state code 15.2-1414.2, but are we allowed, or are the counties allowed to raise the Board of Supervisors' pay without it being an election year for the Board of Supervisors? Because when we did this a few years ago, we had to wait until there was an election of the Board of Supervisors members to provide this, because we got this 4 years ago or 6 years
yeah.
ago. We did this, but we had to do it in the election year of a Board of Supervisors.
My understanding from Ms. Cronin, who was very up on all this, is that, and what's that? Go ahead. Sorry.
I just said I'm not an attorney, but I did,
I
I
don't
did
want
look
to
at it today. The General Assembly made a change in the 2022 session and took out that language
Okay,
for
because
the election year of a Board of Supervisors election.
that was my question.
Mr. Wilmot, she outdid you.
Oh, you're here.
He's happy to be here.
I'm sure she's right, but I'll check.
Page 16. After the change we had this year, is the reason why the county contribution for children's services down because we're getting more from the state?
Yes.
Okay. 17? Mr. Chriscoe?
I may have missed it, and she may have said it. Can we, it doesn't have to be tonight, but can we get the projects that, the $363,136 in projects that weren't funded or weren't included?
Yes.
I
I'll
just
get
couldn't
that
pull it out
list.
fast enough. If you said it, I missed it.
No, I
Okay.
didn't, but I'll be
She
glad
didn't
to
say.
provide that list.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, page 18. The change in the fund balance from 24 to 25, is that just simply revenue coming in?
Why don't you want to come up and answer, just to make sure I don't say something incorrectly.
No, that is actually due to less money that we are funding out of fund balance for capital. So last year, we had $4.5 million from fund balance because we had quite a surplus in the previous year. So for fiscal year '24, we funded quite a bit of capital projects from fund balance. And so we're expecting to use less of fund balance this year, which is why there's a decrease.
About $330,000, I think it was, Ms. Steele said, right?
This is something different. The 338, or that $300,000 number, I think, is a facilities maintenance repair and replacement.
This is like, again, we've spent a lot on fund balance. We did a lot of capital that we were able to do, and so this is because
But
we don't
this
have
is-
the fund
but-
balance to spend
But
on.
this is the revenue last year of increasing fund balance of 5.9 million. but this year, we're only saying we're gonna increase it by 3 point.
No, so what this is the use of that fund balance. It is a little bit confusing, but this is saying that we're using fund balance as revenue source for our expenses.
So are we gonna use 2.8 million?
It's the 3 million is what we have proposed to use in this year, but that has 500,000 that is part of the assigned fund balance for county administrator contingency.
So we're proposing to use $2 million.
$3 million.
The 3 million.
The 3.041.
So how much are we looking at, are we proposing to use of one-time funds for recurring expenses?
2,000,2469. Oh, of one time for recurring expenses, that is 243,000. It's in your, find it. I think it's 248,000. But I will find it. It's on a slide back here.
That's the part of funding the FMRR.
That's the ongoing. The other, now that's the part that's in fund balance. It is in your, how did I budget? 246,984. It's on page 48. So that $3 million number that you see in fund balance is $2 million for capital, 500 for assigned for the county administrator contingency, and 246,984 that we needed to use to balance the budget. And that's what Ms. Steele referenced as funding part of that first radio payment.
It's amazing how someone knows their numbers, isn't it?
So 247 is what's coming out of fund balance that we're gonna use recurring.
Correct.
And that may impact next year's budget.
It will.
Yes,
And
it will.
I'll add a caveat that the 275 that was for the sale of the county garage is not actually part of fund balance because we held that money. So we're saving that, and it's actually part of our revenue in other miscellaneous income for 25. So
So
that's,
I listed it as 521,984 is the two that, because we won't have the county garage to sell again.
So we're using 524 million,
1,000.
524.
24,000.
Good point.
522.
Thanks, George.
It's a couple zeros. So what,
The engineer got it.
so what was that, 520?
521,984 if you add those two together.
So that's the amount of money we're using.
For
Of
Recurring.
recurring
one-time money.
expenses of
Yeah,
one time.
if we don't really want to say fund balance because it becomes part of fund balance when we don't use it. The garage, but we held that back and it's a little different. So if
But
you
all
call
that-
it one-time money.
But all that may be overcome by events, right, if the revenue picture looks better next year, right?
Well, it's still gonna be a 1 cent increase.
Right, and
Next year.
it's, I think that the reality, and I was trying to, say this to the board members individually, that I think I don't know how we could avoid a tax increase next year without some very significant events happening or significant reduction in service. We're only able to make it this year because of these two things. Had we not sold that building, and had we not had an extra amount of money we thought we were paying out, we would have to completely cut FMRR or RIF positions or something other dramatic way to balance the budget. This is as lean a budget as I think we've seen, and I don't know how long.
Well, they've been pretty lean in the past as well.
Okay, go ahead,
Yeah,
Dr.
So, back to 18, so the other local taxes, that's personal property, sales tax, meals tax, lodging tax, are all those taxes involved? Yeah, might just think,
Other local taxes, we're on, which, you said 17, is that what slide we're on?
18.
18, it's exactly what he was.
So other local taxes encompasses sales tax, and then meals tax, lodging tax, those are the big three there. It does not incorporate personal property tax.
okay, so the general,
Electric consumption, business license, deeds of conveyance.
And
so where's the personal property tax?
Personal property is gonna fall under property taxes, so
Oh,
that's that
okay.
first general
Okay, so real
property.
estate, okay, right, right.
so, I don't know if you, go ahead.
No, and under Commonwealth funds, are those the funds that we get from the state to support sheriff, commissioner of revenue?
Yes.
All those things?
Shared
Okay,
expenses
right.
amongst others, yeah.
So when I met with Ms. Steele one-on-one, because I had to change my schedule with her, you had mentioned, Ms. Steele, that we have delinquent taxes of about $1.1 million right now?
No, I think I was referring to the not having the taxes.
Okay, okay.
That it's a reduction in revenue, so we're not collecting it because of tax relief. And that's like right at that
But
million.
what about people not paying their real estate
We,
property taxes?
we keep up with that very well. I mean, and we also have the late fees, and
Okay,
so
okay.
it's collected.
Okay, I'm good. Okay.
May I, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
To piggyback on Mr. Bazzani's comment, and it might go to the fraud investigator for the Commissioner of the Revenue's Office, I'm not sure, but I haven't prosecuted a failure to pay business tax case in umpteen years, like 5 or 6. And it's hard for me to believe that all businesses are paying their business taxes.
I think you will hear the Commissioner of Revenue talk about the importance of getting these, and they've got to do the people who are in the office and the things that are happening, and they're not able to get out, and she wants to be able to get out and follow up on those.
Well, and historically, as a broken record, I've advocated the ability of the Commissioner's Office to have a person in their office who will be a business license inspector, who will go out and make sure that businesses are paying the taxes they owe. And apparently, to date, it's fallen on deaf ears, so I'm hoping that the ears are becoming hearing.
Can we make that an item to discuss? I think that's important. It will pay for itself. That person will pay for themselves in terms of collections.
So that
20,
was
100
what I
times over.
was
That's what she
talking
was
about,
asking for the
the
position.
Commissioner
Yeah.
and her going out. I think she is much more, I don't want to speak on her behalf, but I think she's more comfortable going out and making those kind of, as the Commissioner, going in and questioning and not sending out an employee. But right now, she's tied in with all the other things that they're doing. So she anticipates bringing in,
But I think you can hire a subcontractor it's an incentive base, and a lot of localities do this. They hire a subcontractor on an incentive basis to collect these amounts, either from private citizens or from businesses. And there's lots of them out there that'll do this, and they work only on an incentive basis. So you turn these people loose, and they'll dig and find.
so we'll let her address that since that's her expertise field. One thing I did want to ask, if I can, Mr. Chair, because this just, looking at the county attorney reminded me about you and went ahead and forecasted the funds that we will be collecting for the sale of the property that Ted has gotten for us before, which I'm really
Oh,
not.
surplus tax sales.
Yes.
I did.
So we've not put that into the budget before it had happened, and we ended up having some extra money. She's already looked to see what's coming up and put that into the budget. That was another way to try to make sure that we had
What's that
revenue.
amount? What's that amount?
That amount, it's about 168,000, and I will add the caveat on that there's a little risk involved in that I received the information from the clerk of the circuit court, who provided the list of numbers and who already has claims on them. So I only included the ones, and actually there's one that is really far out that I didn't include, so I brought it down just a little bit from the number she provided, and there is a potential that those people could come forward and claim their money between now and the time the budget, now and at the end of next year.
If we weren't in the position we were in, we would not include that in the budget. That would be something that would just be icing on the cake.
What happens is, when we go to tax sale, which is a property is delinquent for 2 or more years, the county has the authority to put it up for sale through the courts and to satisfy the tax debt. And if there's a surplus over what the tax is owed and the cost of the sale, and if the owner doesn't come forward to claim it, then it goes to the clerk's office. And the clerk holds it for 2 years, subject to someone coming forward and saying, I deserve some of that. Some of that's mine. I'm an owner, I'm a lien holder, and sometimes that happens. We got a glut of these cases and monies because we hadn't been claiming them for 10 years or so. So I wouldn't anticipate we're going to have a lot of money in that regard. So what I recommend is that Maria and her department keep track of these monies that the clerk is holding, surplus funds from these tax sales. But I wouldn't budget, as I think she's implied, I wouldn't budget that we're going to receive all those surplus funds. Perhaps a third to a half of the funds would be a wise estimate.
So this has been a little more aggressive. We, the clerk provided a number of 181,000 that we are currently, that do not have claims and would be received in next fiscal year, and we have budgeted 150 this year.
I'd like to do 90.
Mr. Chair, if I could.
Mr. Smith.
Now, those people that have this money, do they know this money is theirs, a share of it is theirs? Or
Generally not.
they're not notified?
No,
or-
we follow all mechanisms to
Okay.
notify them, yes. What happens in these tax sales is all record owners and lien holders are made parties defendant to the tax sale. So they're notified pursuant to law, either personal service or posted service or substitute service. They're notified that they may have an interest in this subject real property. And either they don't respond or their lien is released. But what happens is after the property is sold, there's sometimes surplus funds from the sale. So perhaps the county's owed $10,000 and the property's sold for $50,000. Well, and the cost of the sale is $10,000. So there's $30,000 in surplus funds. It goes to the circuit court clerk's office. And what happens is an unknown lien holder or beneficiary or owner can come forward in 2 years and claim those funds. If they don't come forward, those funds go to the county. Lately, I've received several claims of unknown beneficiaries, lien holders, and some of those have been paid. So I think the word has gotten out that the clerk has these funds, and they're being more diligent in their attention. But to answer your question, yes, we follow the law, at least I think we do, because I don't handle the tax sales. It's Jim Elliott and Ms. Thomas who file a suit and get the order, and the property is sold. And last year, I think we got over $300,000 or $400,000.
We brought in over 500 between the last two fiscal years.
But that was 10 years worth of funds. So
Wow.
I would, or, you know, thereabouts. I wouldn't bank on that, pardon the pun.
Well, Mr. Wilmot, if you need some help based on Ms. Cronin's advice earlier, she can
I will be calling her in the morning.
A quick question for Maria, or just a comment. So can we just get, I mean, I'd like to graphically see how we're doing over time, pre and post-COVID, those three sales tax, sales
Yep.
tax, meals tax, and lodging tax. I know you provided it, but it'd be good for us and the board just to see how this trending, because I know we've done very well, but I think we've also been very conservative in how we've projected and then the actual amount of income that we get, based on projections, to see how close you've done in terms of forecasting and how close your forecasting has come to the amount.
And how soon will we get your famous, both of y'all's famous spreadsheet that kind of shows out the budget? The one that we can play with, not the PDF copy?
Yeah.
Yes, soon. We're right at it.
Okay.
This was getting this out tonight. Dr. Orth, I would, she'll get you those figures, but we have projected higher and higher based on the fact we were bringing in more. And so I think we've kind of gone after it. And then the sales tax has now been more leveling off. We were trying to push all these revenues as high as we could anticipate. And so I think you'll see that we're being very aggressive on what we think we're going to get. And we're hoping that the sales will continue, but we're not like underestimating the revenue. In the very beginning, when things with COVID, I think we all thought it was going to be, we were going to have, the opposite reaction. But COVID, everything went crazy. And then it took us a year or so to catch up with what we were really experiencing and forecasting that. Now we're much closer.
Yeah, no, thank you, I'd appreciate that.
Page,
So- oh, go ahead.
just go ahead.
No, you go ahead. What
Page
page are we
20?
on? 20? No, nothing on 20. Nothing on 21 for me, if you're asking, gentlemen, if you got another concern. on
21, 22.
I've got one on page 22. Dr. Bladew is here. Dr. Bladew, I was going to ask you a quick question. What is your, and I'll get in more detail with you when we have our joint meeting. Where are you at as far as ADM right now for the school system?
Well, good evening, and thank you for the opportunity
Oh,
to be
thank you.
here.
I'm
We know
sorry.
there's a lot of information
Sorry.
being presented tonight. So our budget is built on 4,800 students, and that is a
4,800.
conservative amount because we wanted to make sure we appropriately budget. Should we have more students, again, there'll be additional funding that would be coming.
And if it were possible, an FMRR account for the school system, whereby you can only use it for one-time costs, would that be something that we can work with together on that?
We have a number of one-time expenses. Certainly, we could provide a list of what
Okay,
they
we'll
are.
talk about that on our joint meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, if you got extra questions, okay. On 44, page,
Hold on.
oh, I'm sorry, yeah, I'm going. Go ahead.
Okay, who's got a question on
Sorry about
anything
that.
next page?
What page?
That's what I'm saying. Where's y'all's next page? $37, JJ? Well, and, Ms. Callaway, you're gonna get us the school's, sales tax fund?
I have it, if you want me to just give a quick,
I would say just
just
email
send
it.
this, yep,
Yep.
no problem.
That's page 28.
Add it when we post this. Make the change before we post it.
Where's your, what was yours?
37.
37.
Yeah, I was just, the HVAC system for Body Tot, how old is that? And are we in a situation where we're patching it with, equipment that, or pieces that we can no longer get?
So, Ms. Callaway and I met, and I think Mr. Baines was there too, with the school staff and discussing, this was a number of months ago, and at that time, when we thought we would not be able to come up with the funds, we suggested that their HVAC person, or their facilities person, talk to our facilities person, just to see if there was any other innovative ways to look at what do we do. And so they've been talking, and that's Mr. Miller and Mr. McIntyre, and listening to the school's presentation, the superintendent's proposed budget, and hearing Mr. Hartley also, I think it's like 5 or more years past the deadline of what's recommended. They use a national standard, and it's well past that. So it could go, or it could be patched and at least held on for another year. And I think that's what we're skating on ice to hope that we can make it another year.
Remember, that project was part of the referendum last year.
So, I mean, it'd be interesting to see the fees that they've been paying to keep that system operational. If it's been going up every single year, then there may be a tipping point where all of a sudden it's gone.
And I think it's, as you all recall, there were a number of HVAC units that were replaced and fixed all at one time, and this was like the next group of them that has come up. And they work with Honeywell, and so they have their assistance as well. So we'll try to find out what we can on that. I'm not personally aware of anything that's being done particular to that, other than I know it needs to be replaced because of its age.
Mr.
But we'll find out.
Bazzani just brought up a good point. The Body Tot renovation that we're not doing, the 4.4 million, is that the HVAC in addition to the 4.4?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
And that wasn't supposed to come online until about, what, 2031, something like that, I believe, from the referendum?
No.
The HVAC had split between bond money, and that was to address it immediately, and then other it was a split, because they needed 4-something million, and it was like half bond, half regular pay-go.
Anything on utilities? Okay, 43, 44.
I've got questions.
Yep.
So, Maurice, Carol, I'm sorry, Ms. Steele, what is the total ask for all of these external organizational requests? I should hopefully have seen a total down there somewhere.
I don't know why we didn't put a total on there, but we will add that on there. I think it's because we had 2 different lists at one time, and then we decided to just put them all together, because if you look right about midway up Rappahannock Community College, that's where it starts, the sort of different set of them.
Looks about $1.5 million if I'm just doing my crazy math here, but we'll see. That's my question. And then, that's on for 44. That's all I've got for 44.
Dr. Orth.
On the grant writer, this is a salary split among,
Five
five
localities of the 6,
right?
So
and
that-
maybe some towns too.
So that would be 10,000?
It's potentially 2 people. They wanted to have 2, so the 50,000 would pay for 2 people, we hope. We're waiting to get those final figures.
But that's our contribution to it, not
Yes.
the total. The total would be.
Right.
So the
Those
contribution would
other
be based.
localities
So how
pay.
would the contribution be based on population size or equal or what? Because obviously, if Matthews, has a smaller population, they wouldn't want to put.
I think it's straight out by
I think the
locality.
counties will pay a rate, and then the towns, because
Right.
the membership fees are set, I forget what it is, but the counties pay a rate, and then the towns pay a rate, which is a lesser rate. So it would be the same proportionate breakdown from our portion to the town's portion. I don't remember what that is, but the towns would pay slightly less.
That's correct, yes.
So, Mr. Chair,
Mr. Bazzani.
so if, we may want to consider the cost benefit of, we're just we're a mosquito on an elephant's rear end in these different organizations, Hampton Roads
No,
Transit.
we're the elephant's rear end on the,
Well, for the middle
Grant
peninsula,
writer.
for the middle peninsula one, we are the big fish.
Big fish?
In the
Okay.
little pond.
In the little pond,
Um,
okay.
That, when you invest in the Middle Peninsula Planning District Commission, I believe our return on investment is about $6 for every dollar that we
Put in.
provide to them for their assistance. We get a return on our investment of about $6. I think that's the number that we typically use. And with these grant writers, that number could go up because there is a ton of infrastructure money that is tied up in these grants. And that's why we're going after these people, to be able to get that money and bring it back to the Middle Peninsula and each of the localities.
Okay.
That's that, yeah.
And I think that, we've heard from Ms. Steele that the time involved in some of these grants to prepare them and get all the documentation is enormous. And, we don't have the time, with our staff, because our staff has so many other responsibilities, but finding someone who knows the route to get these monies and do the right thing could be very valuable.
I had my first meeting with the one that they've hired thus far. It was an excellent meeting, and she knows her stuff. We both have been involved in Land and Water Conservation Fund grants, and came up with some plans for next year, but not for this year.
Okay, so you said they've hired a person already.
One.
One on staff, and where was that person located? Saluda?
Right, but I think it's remote.
A lot of
Oh.
remote.
So it would be nice
I
to.
think she lives on the Eastern
Yeah,
Shore.
it would be nice to know the types of grants that they are applying for, so we can have some sort of.
I will get that list from Mr. Lawrence and share that with the
Yeah,
group.
that'd be great, thank you.
That's it for me.
45.
Mr. Chair, may I, on 44?
Absolutely.
I don't see a request from the Gloucester Matthews Humane Society on this list.
That is listed in the animal controls budget.
So they have
It's-
requested funds?
So we are still talking with them. They did request initially, and that is in animal controls budget. There's been some discussion that they may withdraw their request, but if they do, if that's the final situation, then we will have to obtain assistance and use those funds in another way, like with the kennel cleaning and things.
And the reason I ask is, I was on the board, I'm not on the board anymore, so I'm off the board. So I don't know what's going on, but there may be a rift between the county and animal control, GMHS. And I know Mr. Wright's on board on this, totally on it, Carol's on it, but I personally think it's very important that the county and GMHS have a congenial, mutually beneficial working relationship. So my 2 cents is that be pursued and hopefully resolved.
I think Mr. Wright and I totally agree with you on that. We're in the process of doing that, and I did brief the board when I met with them independently about the situation. No, it's okay, because it's not a good situation, and if, people are hearing about it, we do want to get it resolved.
Okay, next page. Where are you? I'm on. I'm on 48, but you answered my question, but you didn't answer my question. We're just gonna use the 521,000 recurring, we just don't know where it's gonna be yet. It's just gonna be throughout the whole budget.
Right.
Correct.
It's not like a specific thing is being funded, it's
Okay.
general fund.
Sprinkled like fairy dust.
Any more questions?
I would like to say that I want to thank Ms. Steele and Marie for the outstanding work putting this budget together. I'd like to also thank Dr. Bladew for a more reasonable budget request. That's what we've seen in the past. And so I'm hoping that when we meet with the schools that we can try to find some balance with them and try to get them, where they hopefully might need to be. I don't know if we can get it all, but maybe something like the FMRR. But I'm hoping that we can work that out. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Nicosia.
when we talk about body type, Dr. Perdue, one of the things that I am gonna ask now and gonna ask again when we meet as a group, what is the backup plan? Many of you don't know, but I worked for Dave Miller for many years. And so I've got a little insight on our HVAC system, and I would like to know what the backup plan is. Because when those pieces of equipment go down, it's very hard to find replacement items, replacement parts to fix that stuff. So my question is going to be during that meeting, what's the backup plan? Because when we switch from heat to AC, and anything is possible. So what are we gonna do I understand the referendum and all of that, but what is the contingency plan for that body type situation?
Mr. Chriscoe.
So that leads me, thank you, Mr. Nicosia, to my last question. Where do we stand now with our unassigned fund balance in that level? With the budget as presented, what is our unassigned fund balance with respect to our percentages of overages? 16%? I don't see that in here, because I know we're using some of it, but there should still be some left
We had
where we're over.
2.6, and we've accounted for 2 million, so there's 0.6. So that would leave us 0.6 plus the 200-something thousand left out of that 500, and anything else that we grow in by, like the sales tax coming in over. Not much, but it's not, there'll be something.
But that's at the 16% level, too.
That's
well.
no, that's actual fund balance. That's, we've got, the plan would be to the 16%, and what we do with the fund balance is fund usually the next year's CIP. So if we don't spend, but right now we have 2.6, if we come in at budget like we're supposed to the end of the year, so we would have 0.6 left over, that's not if you adopted this budget. But we might have some additional money that doesn't get spent or that comes in over revenue. So say it turned out to be $1 million, then a year from now, I'd be saying, we have $1 million to spend on capital, we better not spend it all, and I'd probably propose 500,000.
I think Mr. Chriscoe's question is, right now, based on fund balance, it's with that $1 million that you're anticipating, where is that number?
So
What
we are
percentage?
still gonna be above the 16% target by
Right.
about $100,000.
16%, $100,000.
So, because we had 2.6, we budgeted the 2 million, the county administrator contingency is 500,000 of it, and then we have 100,000 left. Still above 16,
So,
But barely.
barely.
Right, so, but that's our target is 16, but, and I don't remember what the percentage points were for the dollar amount value. But I can assure you that if something were to happen, this board would be more than happy to dip to the 15% to put in an AC unit at Body Tot if it got to a point of no return. That's right. I was just making sure that we have a cushion for that, because we know that's probably our biggest, most outstanding HVAC system that we have that is probably on its, or it's already used all of its last legs, so it's crawling along now.
Yeah, I think that graphic that you presented at the previous meeting that showed fund balance over time, it might be good to see that graphic with a 14, 15, and 16% figure in it, so we can see the exact amount that's different between 14, 15, and 16. Something like that.
How much is each percent?
Right.
Right, and we have that.
That was in the last presentation, so we
Okay.
can put them.
Okay, we're at the tax rate advertising. And then proposed fee increases. Dr. Orth.
Do we need to do anything about the fee increases? Because that's
Not right
something.
now.
I don't
Just
thi-
while
I-
we're here.
Yeah, I think that's something that we could have as a discussion at one of our work sessions. I
Right.
think
Yes.
I think that'd be a good
the
idea.
matter at hand is
Okay.
the page 50.
Do we need, Mr. Chair, do we need to, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, do we need to discuss the advertised rate tonight or during a
Well,
work session?
that's what I was getting ready to say. Do we have any more questions on the budget as it's presented? Okay, now, we've only got one resolution tonight, or a decision. And this is a resolution to where we want our tax rate to be advertised.
That's what I was gonna ask. Do we wanna do that tonight?
We have to do that tonight.
That has to be done tonight.
Anybody have any thoughts, comments? Dr. Orth?
Yeah, I don't mind speaking up. I know that Ms. Deal has prepared a budget that keeps the tax rate at .583. But I think in the past, we've tried to at least adopt a rate that gives us some flexibility in case the board is very interested in pursuing that. But it doesn't mean that's the tax rate we adopt. I don't want the citizens to think that if we did adopt that rate, that is the rate that we would settle on. But the other thing I do want to comment on, and I've been thinking about this a lot with regard to our support for the military and elderly. This country and the state have come a long way in the respect for veterans. I remember the days of Vietnam, where veterans came back and were spat upon and kicked and everything. And today, how many times do we see when we see a serviceman, thank you for your service? The country has done a lot. And I'd like to think that our citizens who are not veterans recognize what this county and other counties are doing to recognize that by giving them, for their service, their relief. It does mean that the county has to look at its own resources and how we make up that. And that's a tough one, because we all know people who have been in the service who are disabled and what they've done in terms of their lives, and moving from one place to another and all the things that they've sacrificed. And I think it's a great thing. And like I said, having been part of the Vietnam era and knowing friends who have come back from Vietnam and the things that they had to face, and you look now how service people are recognized and patted on the back and everything, it's great. I think it's really super that that's necessary for this country. But I just want citizens to know that, the county is, and I think all the counties, it's not just us, it's all the counties in the state, and I think all the country is doing that, that we have to consider how do we make up that revenue. And so that's just my comment on that.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yep, thank you, Mr. Hutson. Yeah, I tend to agree with Dr. Orth that what we're doing for the veterans is done very well. The issue that I have with that is that General Assembly gives us that power, and they love to put unfunded mandates upon their localities, and I see that as such. The state is operating at a huge surplus in funds. And they give us this power, but then they don't give us anything to recoup these lost dollars to our local accounts. Same thing they do, I mean, the lottery was supposed to save education, but all they did was take away that amount of money and replace it with what the lottery generates. So it's a shell game at the state level that we're now left to deal with because everyone knows it's the right thing to do. They tell us it's the right thing to do, but then the state doesn't help us out. My only concern with advertising any rate higher than what we currently are sitting on is that in the last election, the citizens of this county sent us a notice that they didn't want their taxes raised. Ms. Steele has done a fantastic job in preparing this with help of staff, and I won't support anything other than what we have currently because that is what the citizens told us at the ballot box in last November.
And that was the ultimate poll right there, so.
Mr. Chair, I think the poll was based on statements that we would have funding for a fire station and a bunkhouse. And as we see from the budget presented, we have no funding for a fire station and a bunkhouse. So the poll was the poll, but it was unfortunate that there were repeated statements that we have the money to build a fire station and a bunkhouse. And the facts are, and we have to deal with the facts and the evidence and be truthful with the citizens, the facts are we do not have money for a fire station and a bunkhouse. No fire station or bunkhouse will be built this spring. Had the referendum passed, they'd be breaking ground in the spring. So I think the comments that I keep hearing about, well, that was in the referendum, I'm kind of confused. This continued reference to that was in the referendum and this was in the referendum. What was in the referendum, because we wanted to give citizens a choice about their future and to address these real needs, such as Mr. Nicosia mentioned with HVAC in the schools, because those are safety issues. You know, if you have a school that is blazing hot or freezing cold, that's a safety issue for the students and the teachers and the staff. And it's a safety issue with the fire station, the bunkhouse, and that's why we gave the choice to the voters. But now we see crystal clear that the facts are not what was said by the opponents of this referendum. We have no money for the station, we have no money for the bunkhouse, and we have no construction. So I want to set the record straight about what the facts are as we stand right now.
Mr. Chair.
Bazzani.
So I'd like to present the other side of the facts. We knew in the beginning that we could have, the issue was not that we had the money to build a firehouse, not that we had the money to build. We did not have the money to build it. What we did have was the ability to pay on a debt the firehouse and the bunkhouse. It's like going to buy a car, a $50,000 car, and most people don't have $50,000. What they'll do, they'll go to a bank and borrow it. So during the town hall meeting, Ms. Steele explicitly said that we did not have to have the firehouse in the referendum. We could have done the firehouse without the referendum. So those are the other set of facts that I want to bring up to make sure that everybody understands that. No, we did not have the money to the cash, if you will, pay-go, if whatever you want to call it, to pay for a new firehouse. But we did have the wherewithal to make the payments on a new firehouse with the bond referendum. But now that's been delayed because the fire department is now making, I don't know if I can discuss that or not, the issue about where they want to locate their the study. They want to do a study as to where they want to locate that. Once that's done, then we probably need to discuss that issue as a board. So I just want to present the other side of those facts, that We did not, for the firehouse only, we did not need to have a referendum for that. We had the ability to make the payments, like you're having the ability to pay for a car, monthly payments. We did have that ability. We did not have the cash, as Mr. Gibson indicated, and that was not, that was an untruth.
Mr. Chair, the repeated statement during that discussion was, we have the money, we don't need this referendum, and all these other projects are luxuries. But as we see, these projects are unfunded, we have no way to pay for them, and that's where we are. So I just want the citizens to know that what they were told, that we have the money for a fire station, was not true, and that's what this budget reflects. And so I wasn't going to bring this up tonight, but you kept saying, well, that was in the referendum, and this was in the referendum, if it was some sort of victory that we're not being able to fund these things. So, we're all here to serve the county and provide services. And I believe that's what we all want to accomplish here. But we also have to look at the reality and the facts of the dire budgetary situation we are in, because all of these projects that are noted in this budget, the cost is going to go up and up and up and up. So I'm not supporting a tax increase. The voters voiced their opinion, I think, with somewhat unclear information, but they made their choice, and so I understand that choice, but I just want to make sure the facts are straight.
Ms. Callaway, can I ask you a question? You can finish. Next year, what, when we free up debt payments, what will that amount be?
Next year, so this year it's about $736,000. And grab my slides if you want me to be exact. We don't free up more debt until fiscal year 26, I believe it is.
So where are we using that freed up?
To support general fund operations.
Well, when we first asked for it, it was for the radio system.
Right.
So we knew we were kind of hitting it at the same time. We were supposed to be doing it in '24, we're not, but '25 has got it. So that was, out of that 700, was 129,000 or 127,000, and then the approximately 500, I think. And we were estimating that the radio system was going to cost 500 a year, and it came in just a little bit under.
I was just going to show where they can see it in the slides. So that negative 769,643, where our transfer to debt service is less, that is largely from debt retirement.
Okay, so the 769,643 and 500 of that is because we're not paying for the radio system this year, but we're paying for it next year.
We are paying for the radio system next year.
But we're not paying
So
for
out
it.
of that 769, almost 500.
But we had it in both years. That's why you're not seeing a flux. We thought it was going to happen this
So
year.
we have 269,000 extra.
Yeah, if we are using that 500,000.
So
as offset.
are we using that 269, 270 for anything?
Balance
all
the
in the
budget.
operating
It's balance
budget.
in the budget.
So does that 521 that we talked about earlier, do we add the 270 to that?
Sounds like it's mixing monies. I think that we
No, but
don't have to pay
we're not
the debt.
mixing money because we've talked about using for debt payoffs to fund the fire station. So if we're using that 269 for something this year, for general obligation, then that's 269 we won't have this year or next year
Right.
to fund the fire station and have debt payoff.
And that's true. We did not reserve the balance of that debt payoff to hold on to it. And in fact, there was, you might want to explain about the Davenport amount and we took out
So,
money.
but still, where we're getting at is $270,000
Yes.
that we would have had for debt, for financing, we're not gonna have next year.
Correct.
And they had anticipated us putting money aside each year, and that fund balance was growing, and we took it to zero. So that's almost the same amount of money. I don't know if it
Yeah,
wasn't exactly, but they were saying, yes, you should put this 279 over here, and we did not.
So to where I'm trying to go with this is, so next year, we're gonna have roughly $522,000 that we're gonna have to make up, that we're already gonna be in the hole, and then plus 270 that we were gonna use for debt or for financing for the fire station.
We'll be starting at the ground if we
Right.
want, yes, if we, for next year. We-
4096 as opposed to the 4865.
So, Mr. Chair, that means if we are going to start a firehouse or build a firehouse, that means it'll never get done without raising taxes, right?
Either
the way I
raising
see it.
taxes or cutting services.
That's the way I see it. Thank you, Mr. Gibson, for letting the citizens know that, that the referendum information that we received, if they had been given adequate information that had been correct and not being told that it was a smokescreen over and over and over and over, that's what I heard, it was a smokescreen. I think we'd be a lot further along than where we are now.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to say,
Mr.
I'm going
Bazzani.
to say one more time. There were no smoke screens.
You
at the
said
ta-
it was.
There were no smoke screens at the town hall.
You're the
Miss-
one that said it was.
Excuse me, I've got the floor. There were no smoke screens at the town hall. Ms. Steele specifically said, when I asked the question, can we build a firehouse without a tax increase? And she twice said that, no. And the reason why she said no is because we have the ability to make the payments on the firehouse. There was nothing discussed about we have funds to pay for the house, because we did not have the funds. So we had to make a decision, like buying a car. I'm going to do it like a parable. You buy a $50,000 car, you don't have $50,000 in cash, you're going to borrow the money to do that. And we had the ability to borrow the money with the existing revenues to pay for the firehouse. And that was my objection to the referendum. So those are the facts. Thank you.
That was a smokescreen.
Mr. Bazzani, you repeatedly used the word smokescreen, repeatedly used the word smokescreen, repeatedly told people that we had the money to build the fire
Did not
station.
say that. Read my newsletter.
I read your newsletter. I read your newsletter, and it was replete with factual inaccuracies that misled the voters. So I'm not going to sit here tonight and let you again state things that simply aren't true. We didn't have the money to build a fire station. We don't have the money this year. We're not going to have the money next year. Excuse me, I'm still talking here. I didn't interrupt you. And so I didn't appreciate that accusation. I think it was an accusation of suggesting fraudulent behavior, which is illegal. We put this information before the voters truthfully, and there was a repeated statement that the money was there. And we see crystal clear from this budget, there is no money for a fire station, there's no money for a bunkhouse, and our citizens are suffering because of it. And so we have no solution to provide for this service that we need. I want to provide this for the men and women of the fire stations and the volunteers who serve us so faithfully. And if there's some way that we can accomplish this in the future, I will do so. But we need to do this transparently and openly before the public.
Ms. Callaway, can I ask you a question? Did we not say that during the town halls that we had enough revenues to make payments on the firehouse? Did we have at the time, before the Davenport report, to say if we excluded the firehouse, can we build a firehouse without a tax increase? And that we had enough revenues to make the payment, not the cash, but the payments on the firehouse. Could we have done that? And I hate to put you on the spot,
Yeah.
but I want to
I'd
correct the
rather-
facts.
I think I'd rather be the one to answer that and not
Okay.
have Ms. Callaway there, and I was the one doing a lot of the heat back then, too. I'm going to answer not indirectly, but I want you to understand that at the time that we were discussing this, we did not realize how lean our situation is. And so had we had that $279,000 plus the difference between 500 and the actual payment, that could have worked towards a debt payment. We don't have that. So if we didn't add any of the staff, and we made a few other little cuts here and there, then we could have come up with the money that was needed until the next payoff of a debt was going to occur. So I think it seemed more feasible that, yes, we could borrow money knowing that we were going to have debts being retired in the future. I do agree, because I heard it, I read it, people misunderstood. They kept saying we had the money. And in fact, we had citizens come in here and say, why did the county administrator say this? And so I think there was a misconception on having the money in hand. The part that we talked about was we did not have to do the bond referendum, that we could borrow without the bond referendum for the fire department. I think the reality check that I would like to say as a county administrator right now is we are not in a good standing financially of where I think we should be. We can't fund the things that we need to fix. We cannot improve things at our facilities to make a better quality of living. Our focus has been on no tax increase to the point that I think it's hurt the county. And at this point, we're now don't even have the money to pay a debt payment for the fire department until something else changes.
Mr. Nicosia.
I'll get off the fire department for a minute. Then I'm gonna ask a very simple question. I teach all day long to my students. You can have checks in your checkbook. That doesn't mean you got money in your account. Okay? So, Ms. Steele has done, and you all have done a fantastic job giving the citizens what they asked, which was no tax increase. But I think it's safe to say that whether we agree with a tax increase or whether we don't, and I'll belabor it all day long, it's coming. It may not come this year, but it's coming. It has to come in order for us to operate. Okay? Simply, we just have to consider it in order to operate. Because you already said, if we didn't have, this time next year, we're not going to have. Keep that in mind.
So just out of curiosity, Mr. Nicosia, what are your thoughts on the discussion that we have on advertising the rates? Since this is the first year that you're on the board, what are your thoughts on what we should do?
Well, I think just like everybody else, I think that I respect the citizens of the county who said, not this year. But I think over the course of the next year, we really need to take a hard look at it and give them the information to say, ladies and gentlemen of Gloucester County, in order for us to operate, this is what we need to do.
But it's my understanding that the people who voted for the referendum, which was 2 cents, but had nothing to do with the operating budget of all the other things that we do in the county.
True.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Which is why last year when we were having these discussions that I was trying to get us to do this year so we could have a better understanding of our position with respect to operating expenses before we went down that road. That didn't happen. Fortunately, unfortunately, either way, what we're faced with is what we're faced with, and I think we just owe it to them to do what is right and just, and that's what they asked us to do.
I will tell you what I would like to see in the next year's budget. Next year, this horse has left the barn. I think next year, I would love for Ms. Steele to come up with her budget And if the budget, if she thinks it should be $90 million, based on what the school's requesting and what the county's requesting, she presents us with $90 million. We then come back and say, well, we can't do that. Let's figure out where we have to cut. And we put on our big boy pants, and we make the budget cuts as we're going. And it shouldn't be, then it will be the county administrator's suggestion, but it'll be our budget. It's easy to tell her we don't want a tax increase. But what we need to do is look at the budget and cut the line items so where we can bring it back. And if we have to cut services or whatever else, it's on us to make the budget equal. That's what I think we need to do.
I think if you wanted to do that, we could ask Ms. Steele what the total request was on top of what she's built in this budget, and you guys could advertise the rate that it would take to fulfill everyone's ask this year. I'm sure she could probably pull those numbers pretty quick for us, because I think we've done that in the past, and it's probably closer to 8 or 9 cents that we would need.
3.5 million is the first tally.
So that's 9 cents.
I mean, we haven't done that in probably 10 years.
No, it's been,
First year we were on the board, we raised the tax rate 8 cents.
It's been a number of years.
yeah, but we've
12 years
done
ago,
something
13
similar,
years
but
ago.
because what she recommends in here at 60.3 does not mean that's what, I mean, we could go at 68.3 if y'all wanted to, and fully fund everybody's ask.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying I think we need to look at it from the point of view and look at the budget and truly make cuts.
My suggestion then would be to advertise at 68.3. That gives an extra penny cushion over top of what Ms. Steele just threw out as a $3.5 million bogey. Go at 10 cent and advertise at 68.3. Come back into our budget work session with the spreadsheet with everything loaded up, full bore, add everything in there, and then we can look at it and do it if you want to. I mean, that's probably fairly doable.
But then we're sitting there after everything's been cut out of the budget this year is the issue. It should have been done before it was ever cut out of the budget. I mean, I'm gonna leave it at that. That's what I think we need to do next year. Ms. Steele.
I think for the peacefulness within our community, based on everything that's happened, I think if we advertised a higher rate like that, it would cause a whole lot of angst to the community and it wouldn't get passed in the end. And so I think that maybe I'm sort of in between what both of you all are saying, and that looking at next year, maybe we need to, well in advance of the budget, start putting out the cost through our community engagement avenues of, this is how much this would cost on the tax increase. And just start putting out things earlier so that you all have feedback from the community, not the same as any bond referendum, but where people are saying, we do want it, or I'm willing to. I feel like it is my job to make some of these cuts and bring a budget to you that you're asking for. At the same time, I would welcome the ability to put some visionary things in there and not have them ruled out ahead of time.
Exactly.
So I think I'm kind of in between, but I think whether you all want to advertise an increase or not, we're going to make this work. We always do. I don't know that putting anything else bigger than that. I think we've already made these cuts. They're kind of done, I think.
So
I
Mr.
mean,
Hutson,
however y'all want to work. I mean, obviously you can make adjustments up and down.
yeah. Mr. Hutson, I'm kind of conflicted because I know when we started the budget process, you basically said that we were not going to increase taxes. And that means that we should advertise the rate at our current rate, and not give that flexibility to Ms. Steele. On the other hand, I know that in our discussions, there are things that we may want, but on the other hand, the comment you made makes me think we're not going to do anything anyway, and that we'll be looking this animal down the road next year. So I guess that's where,
My biggest concern, Dr. Orth, is that we're roughly $800,000 in the hole next year before we even start.
right, that's next year.
270 and 521.
Yeah, but the 500 is already out of next year's budget. That's already included there. So what I'm seeing, and if we can go back to page 16, is because in all of our deliberations, when we were talking about referendum and everything else, that debt service number of $4,865,858 continued out for 20 to 30 years, depending on what strategy we used. To me, that's our bogey, is at 769, 643. That's our problem number in our budget. Because that's the number that Davenport had built out as a constant for whatever scenario we wanted to look at for the borrowing. To me, that's the hole in what we're looking at.
Excuse me, but our bogey next year is gonna be the 521,984 that we're using one-time funds on for recurring cost, plus the $270,000 that's extra from that 500,000.
If I can, Mr. Chair, Davenport's plan did take the 500,000 into account, so it was only the 269. They knew we were gonna be borrowing for 10 years.
$270,000.
Right.
Plus the 521,984 that we're using one-time monies for recurring costs for this year. So 521,984 plus 270 is give or take $800,000.
Now, you're talking about FY '26.
Correct.
Just make sure we're here tonight to vote on
I
FY
know what we're
'25
voting
rate.
on right now
But
for
we're also
25,
looking
but-
down the beast that we're dealing with for FY '26, which we've just said, as Mr. Nicosia said, it's gonna be there. We're not gonna be able to avoid it.
I would say that if this, since the people have spoken on, they don't want any tax increases, then we advertise the rate at our current rate of 58.3, and next year we'll have to deal with the deficit we're gonna have to contend with.
So just, Mr. Hutson, just again to clarify a comment you made for next year, that we asked Ms. Steele to present to us a budget that she thinks would run this county really well, and then it's up to us to take that budget and say, okay, let's just say it's 90 million that might require a 15-cent tax increase, right? That we then start backing off as to what, is that
No,
what?
what I'm saying is if she thinks the number is $90 million, once we get the budget and look at it, then we're gonna say, well, shoot, we can only raise it 2 cents, 4 cents, whatever. Then we have to start cutting it back, or we leave it at the 58.3 like it is this year, and then we figure out what we have to cut to get back to that number.
That's 26.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, it's next year. That's why I said the horse is gone this year. But next year, I think it's something we need to look at.
Mr. Wilmot, let's theoretically say that we vote at 58.3 for the advertised rate, can we midstream, 6 months from now, in an emergency, come back and say we want to, if something blew up, I'm just saying if something blew up, could we come back midstream and say we want to do this increase?
Yes.
We can do that.
Yes.
Okay, then there's no issue then.
Well, I think there is, but
Well, what's your opinion?
What's-
I'd like to hear it.
Well, I don't see the harm in Mr. Chriscoe said, I was asked, that you'd advertise 10 cents. He knows that's not gonna fly, and it would cause a groundswell of vitriol and no tax rate increase at all. The county administrator has recommended advertising a 2-cent increase to give you the flexibility that you may need. Why you don't do that is beyond me. That's my opinion.
And that's kind of why I'm conflicted, because, again, your comment, but then listening to, Mr. Wilmot, I'm battling internally about what to do. I'm stuck in between, yes and a no.
And I agree. This is, what, the 12th time that we've done this together, 13th time we've done this together. Yeah,
I know.
it's the same argument. But with respect to everyone's opinions, and the work that's gone into this, I will make the motion that we advertise the real estate tax rate at 60.3. I will leave the personal property tax alone simply because I think the mechanism that the commissioners are using has been flawed, because I have a 3-year-old vehicle today that is worth more money than the day I bought it. So that's why I want to leave the personal property tax rate alone.
I'll second it. I'll second the motion.
$22.95, but to end this conversation and get us to move on so we can really figure out what we need to do,
I'll second that
that's
motion.
my motion.
Any discussion?
Yeah.
Ms. Steele?
Dr. Orth?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
No.
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
No.
Mr. Nicosia?
No.
Mr. Gibson?
No.
Motion fails.
I tried.
Okay, would anybody like to make another motion?
I'll make a new motion. I'll make the motion that we keep the real estate tax rate at 58.3 and the personal property tax rate at $295.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Steele?
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hudson?
No.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Nicosia?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Dr. Orth?
No.
Okay, motion carries.
All right. There's only one other item on the agenda. Before we go there, I will say this. This evening, Mr. Smith and I, Ms. Steele, met with Ms. Arsenovich and Mr. Anderson for preparing for our joint meeting. I think we're well on way. I think it was good. So, and now, is there a motion?
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Meeting adjourned.